I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Jemma Mouland from the Aging Better today, and she's going to talk about the ageing workforce and what that means for both society and for people within work. We have a strategic partnership with Aging Better. We're very pleased to be doing that. And as you all know, those people on the webinar today, this is part of this year-long, hopefully even longer, partnership program that we've built around Luton. For your benefit, Jemma, we handed out a number of certificates, and I know a number of the people on the call were qualified to the award level of the ESS last week in Luton. It was a really, really great event. So I'm very proud of everyone that's done that. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the webinar's about ageing population, ageing workforce. Jemma Mouland is the specialist. I'm going to hand over to you, Jemma, and you take it away.
Perfect. Right, I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you now. So Scott, shout at me if it doesn't work properly, or else I'll be doing my presentation all to myself. So here we go. Can everyone see that?
Works, great.
Perfect, look at that. Right, let's not get too excited. There's plenty of time for it to still go wrong. So I am going to spend probably no more than 20 minutes or so talking you through the importance of fulfilling work for a good later life. And I'm going to share with you some of the stats around what our ageing population looks like in the UK and what that means in terms of our workforce. I'm going to share with you some of the challenges that older workers face in the workplace, and then also share with you some of our insights and research behind some of the best practice and some of the areas for change that we see, both in how our support services work for those who are in work, but also in terms of how our wider workplaces and employment practices need to change in order for us to make most of the many opportunities that our longer lives and our longer working lives have for us. So just firstly, just a tiny bit about us, in case you're not familiar with who we are. The Centre for Aging Better is an independent charitable foundation. So we were set up back in 2015 with an endowment from what is now known as the National Community Lottery Fund. And we are all about creating a society where everyone can lead a good later life. And there are 4 key areas of work for us as an organisation: looking at how we can make sure that our homes are more suited to our longer lives, both our existing homes and our new homes; thinking about how our communities can be better structured to enable us to develop and maintain social connections throughout our life; thinking about how we can support people to enter their later life in good health; and finally, a really big and really important area of work for us is looking at how we can support people in later life to be in fulfilling work for longer. We are part of what is known as the What Works network of organisations, which is basically a network of organisations that exist to promote the better use of evidence in decision making. So we are all about how you can use evidence to inform policy and practice. And so we do a lot of work to both develop and share evidence around what works and supporting to lead a good later life. And then most importantly, we're really about working with people who do this work on the ground, that work across those issues around employment or housing or whatever it may be, to then actually apply that evidence and to try and kind of bring about change in the real world. So just for those of you who might not be completely familiar, I guess, with all the statistics, just a couple of statistics around ageing in the UK generally. So we are seeing massive increases in our older population, and we're making huge strides in longevity. So there is expected to be a 21% increase in people aged 65 and over the next 10 years or so. So that's going to be quite some significant shifts in the makeup of our society. I think incredible achievement is that 1 in 3 of today's babies will live to see their 100th birthday. So we're making really, really impressive and very rapid changes to the length of our lives. But this does come with quite a significant caveat, that there are some severe inequalities in our both life expectancy and also our healthy life expectancy. And you can see here the discrepancies in places between Kensington and Chelsea and others such as Manchester, where people can expect to lead quite different experiences in their later lives. So one of the things that we're really all about promoting is not just about adding more years to our life, but how we can add more life to those years, and thinking how can we actually tackle some of those inequalities head on. And those inequalities do often stem from and really come to the fore when we think about working in later life, which I'll take you through in some more detail shortly. So, in terms of why work is such an important area for us at Centre for Ageing Better, we know that there are 4 things that are really important to help people lead a good later life. You need to have good enough health, you need to have good enough financial security, you need to have social connections and a sense of well-being, and particularly there around kind of having a meaning and purpose in your life. And we know that work interrelates with all of these factors. Now, it's not so much that working for longer makes you more healthy. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but we do know that healthier people tend to work for longer. And we also know that if you're out of work involuntarily, that can actually be quite bad for your health. Work obviously has a very clear relationship with your financial security, both as you are approaching later life and your retirement, and then into your retirement, by allowing you to save more and also delay that drawdown on your pension. Work is a really important source of social connections and very much a part of that meaning and purpose that we feel in our lives. So work is really, really important for all those different components to lead a good later life. But when we're talking about work, we're not talking about kind of any old work will do. The quality of work is absolutely fundamental to experiencing any of the positive effects of being in employment for longer. So we're really about promoting people in later life being able to access good quality, secure, sufficiently paid work. It's not about kind of getting people in any old job, and any old job will do. So, me clicker stopped, there we go. And it's not just us that says that we think work in later life is really important. Actually, people themselves tell us that it's a really important part of their lives. And when you ask people what they miss the most when they retire, admittedly, there's quite a large group of people that say they don't miss anything, fair enough. But the majority of people do say that they miss something about work. And I think what's really interesting in this graph is that it's not even the practical elements, the money, that people miss so much. It's actually that social interaction. So believe it or not, it's the people that you're sat around today or people that you're meeting in your meetings that are the people that you're really going to miss when you retire. And so that social interaction is a really important component of work for people. But working in later life and up until your later life is not without its challenges. Because from midlife, you're more likely to be a carer, have one or more health conditions, say you feel insecure at work, face redundancy, be stuck and then also stay stuck in low pay. And you're less likely to be offered or to ask for training, be promoted or to progress at work, or to be able to re-enter the workforce if you leave. So if we're to support people to realise the many benefits of working for longer, and indeed to support employers to realise those benefits, there's a whole host of challenges that we need to overcome. So I'm briefly just going to whiz you through some of the stats at the moment to show you sort of where we're at in the UK in terms of our longer working lives, and then we're going to get into the detail on some of those challenges and solutions. So within the UK, we have more workers than ever before, and a notable proportion of that growth, comes from those aged 16 to 49. But actually, the vast majority of the growth in our workforce comes from those aged 50 and over. They are an incredibly important part of our workforce and are growingly important, as you can see from this rapid increase in the numbers of over 50s that we have in the workplace. So when we're talking about our older workforce, we're not talking about this workforce that's going to come in the next 10, 20 years' time. We're talking about our workforce here and now. Nearly 1 in 3 workers in the UK are over the age of 50. The average UK employee is in their 40s. And at the same time, employers are facing a set of real life challenges. Job vacancies are up, yet skill shortages are also up. So we need to be recognising that our older workforce is growing, and they are a huge opportunity and potentially a huge asset in overcoming some of those employment challenges that we're experiencing at the moment. And some interesting stats there, as well as being cautious, I guess, about thinking that we're going to have all the answers to these kind of skill shortages in new entrants to the labour market. because actually we're going to have 300,000 fewer workers under the age of 30 in the labour market by 2025, yet 1 million more workers over the age of 50. So they have to be seen as part of the solution to the future needs in our economy. So in terms of how we're doing at the moment, it's not been a too bad news story, really. We've got nearly or over now 10 million people working over the age of 50 and over 1 million people over the age of 65 who are in work. But I think this graph is really stark in that it shows that from your early to mid-50s, the employment rate drops off rapidly. And for some people, that is a positive decision. They've chosen to take retirement. But for many others, it's not something that they've necessarily chosen. It's issues such as health, caring responsibilities, or redundancy that have almost forced people out of work before they even hit their state pension age. And so that's already a challenge. If you think about someone falling out of work in the age of 55, 56, that's 10 years before they hit their state pension age. But as state pension age increases, the period of time that people are going to be out of work, if they're facing these challenges around health and care and so forth in their early 50s, that length of time out of work is going to go on for longer and longer and longer. So there's a real burning platform here for us to be doing something about it. So I'm just going to now share with you a little bit about what we know about older workers' experiences in the workplace and some of the challenges that they face, before I then go into some more detail around what we think the areas for improvement and solution are. So a really big area that we need to be paying attention to is recruitment. And we know that people in later life face a host of different challenges when it comes to recruitment processes. We did some work earlier this year or late last year, I think it's late last year, where we did a bit of a survey just to try and find out some more about people's experiences of recruitment. And over a quarter of people say they've been put off applying for jobs since they turned 50 because they think they're aimed at younger candidates. The way in which we write our job descriptions, the way in which we market our jobs can quite often feel like it's geared towards that younger population and just put people off applying once they hit 50 and over. Almost a third think that they may have been turned down for a job specifically because of their age, and nearly 1 in 5 have considered actually having to hide their age when applying for a job since turning 50. So it's having a real big impact on people, on both their perception of what kind of jobs are available to them and also how they even behave in the recruitment processes. We know that in the workplace, people in later life also face a range of challenges in accessing training and development opportunities. And we know that as our workplaces are continuing to change and the nature of work continues to change, being able to continually learn and develop new skills is so important. But over 50s really are the least likely to access support. And I think out of all of the OECD countries, it's only Turkey and Slovenia who actually have lower levels of in-work training for over 50s. So there's loads of room for improvement. But it's also interesting that actually with age, we both we have a lower expectation of actually receiving work-related training, and people actually say they're less likely to want it. So there's a host of complex challenges here. Maybe we need to be reframing our offers. Maybe we need to be thinking about different kinds in these longer working lives. We also know that people over the age of 50 start to feel much less secure in their work as they age. And this graph shows that actually from as early as sort of mid-40s, people start to feel much less secure in their jobs. And one of the ways in which this sometimes manifests is particularly in circumstances where there might be a restructure in the workplace. And when we asked people, when people are asked whether they think a restructure has had a big impact on their job, over 50s are more likely to say that they think their work has been substantially affected. And they're much less likely to feel confident that if they were to lose their job or quit their job, that they'd be able to find another one of a similar salary. And we do know that once people fall out of work in later life, it's really, really challenging for them to get back into work. We know from previous stats on the work programme, we haven't got the latest ones on the new work and health programme, but of all of the different categories of participants on that programme, it's people over the age of 50 who have the worst job outcome rate. So mainstream employment support for people just doesn't work as well when you're over the age of 50. And even some of those more enhanced programs, such as the work and health program, still don't work as effectively for this age group. So we need to really rethink our models of employment support as well, if we're to recognise the challenges and respond to the challenges that people in later life face if they fall out of work. And because of those many challenges, once you're over the age of 50, you're much more likely to be unemployed for longer than younger age groups, and you're the least likely to actually ever then return back to work. So I just wanted to go into some more detail specifically on that particular challenge. So within the Aging Better, we've got two streams of work at the moment. One which is on age-friendly employment and what employers need to do to improve their practices, particularly to help retain older workers. We also have a whole host of work which is looking at worklessness and employment and those particular challenges around people who have fallen out of work and supporting them to get back in. And from that work, we know that over 50s do face a range of very complex and interlocking challenges: health, caring responsibilities, and the needs for upskilling and potentially retraining, feeling that the support services out there aren't particularly dedicated or suitable for them. So there's a whole host of different challenges that people are facing. And subsequently, there are no easy answers to this particular challenge. We also know that some of the issues that people face when they're out of work are actually very age specific. Sometimes the sort of response we get to this piece of work is that, well, you know, those challenges around health or care or skills apply at all ages. But actually the nature of some of those challenges are quite specific to someone's age. So for example, quite often people have been in one type of work for a very long time. That type of work may no longer exist anymore, and they've lost that job, and they're having to completely refresh their skills, completely start again in terms of training and development. They may have not had any encounter with education or training for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. So there are some very age-specific challenges that individuals face, and others are more exacerbated or more extreme because of their age. So for example, in later life, you're more likely to have a health condition, you're more likely to have more than one health condition that you're dealing with. That is also likely to then coincide with a caring responsibility. So you kind of get a concentration of challenges for people in later life. And therefore, we do think there's a real case for actually thinking about how we can have more targeted offers to support our older workers and older job seekers. We also know that actually, while there's some common issues that people face and challenges, these challenges do play out quite differently in different locations. And so we do need to have solutions that are responsive to the local context. In some places, transport is a massive barrier, and access to decent, accessible and affordable transport was huge. In other places, it was less so. Actually, it was the nature of the jobs that were available locally weren't really suited to them, or they didn't feel like actually they were going to have a good chance of accessing them, perhaps because they had some big colleges locally and they were getting lots and lots of young people going straight into those jobs. So it's really important to think about the local context and the local economic context when thinking about the solutions for this age group. And I think one thing that's come through really strongly from our research in this space is that the multiple challenges that people face once they've fallen out of work has quite a significant and pretty unique effect on over 50s. And that's a total disengagement from work and employment. We see a very high economic inactivity rate amongst over 50s, much higher than younger age groups. And from our qualitative work, we found people as young as 47 saying, I've retired, I've given up, I'm never going to get back into work. I'm just going to have to make do and make mend until I hit my state pension age. You know, it's sort of game over for me. And that sort of internalized agement and writing yourself off is a really significant challenge that we need to overcome. And therefore, we need to be much more proactive and sensitive in how we support this age group. And one thing that came through really clearly in our work is that when you're faced with all these different sorts of challenges in getting back into work, it can be a very complex system for people to navigate. And there's lots and lots of different institutions that are responsible for the different challenges that you might be facing. And quite often it almost felt like it was falling on the shoulders of that individual job seeker to have to navigate all of these different models of support. And even within the workplace, sometimes those who are in work, they felt like it was almost down to them to sort of figure out who they needed to go to for what element of support. And there's one, great quote that we got from someone who actually works in employment support and supporting people to return to work. They were saying, we think we're working together, we talk about integration, but in reality, that's not how it's playing out for people on the ground. So there's a host of things that we need to do in terms of making sure that that whole system of employment support and back to work support is more integrated, that we're working together, and that we've got those solutions that are more targeted and tailored to the needs of over 50s. But there's also a whole load of work that we need to do in becoming more age-friendly as employers. So I'm just going to quickly whiz through these with you, and I'm really keen to sort of get into a bit of a discussion about them. So one area for improvement with employers we think is about being more flexible, about flexible working. So we know that flexible working is really important if particularly you've got a health condition or a caring responsibility. It enables you to balance those other elements of your life with work. And we need to make sure that we're being flexible about those flexible options, that we think about informal flexibility as well as those more formal arrangements that people have. And it's not good enough to just have a policy and say, yeah, we've got a flexible working policy, anybody can do it if they want to, because we know that even those organisations that do have flexible working policies, people, and particularly people in later life, aren't accessing them. So we need to proactively support people to navigate that system and know that that is an option for them. We really need to think long and hard about our recruitment processes. I think it's fair to say that either there's a mix of people in later life feeling and perceiving that our recruitment processes are very biased. And I think there's quite a few examples of where our recruitment practices can be quite significantly ageist in their structure, be that consciously or not. And it probably is the latter more often than the former. So we need to be conducting much more age-positive recruitment campaigns. I cannot tell you the amount of times, and you'll notice it now, if you go out and look at pictures attached to different job adverts or descriptions or campaigns, everyone looks younger than me. And we're not very good at having age diverse recruitment campaigns, so being much more considerate and conscious in that. We also need to be careful of the words even that we use in our job descriptions: energetic, lively, fresh, new starter. Those words can all immediately put off an older applicant. And I think there's also space to be thinking about, can we develop more dedicated programs, perhaps for people who have been out of work for a long time because of a health condition or a caring responsibility, a bit like we have for mothers who might have been out of work for a while. And what could we do particularly for older workers and actively supporting them to get back into work? A really important one, and one Scott's heard me talk about for quite a long time before, is about ensuring that everyone has the health support that they need. We know that people over the age of 50 are less likely to access the health support they need at work. And so we do need to be really rethinking that model of support so that it works for our longer lives, as a growing proportion of our working population is going to have one or more long-term health conditions. I think a really important enabler is to have a much more open and supportive culture around health at work. We just need to make it more normal to have these conversations about our health in the workplace. And that's beneficial for people of any age. And I think that stands true for pretty much all of these areas for improvement. And we then need to make sure that once you've had that conversation, that translates into action, and that there's full and equal access to support, and that we get support earlier on. It doesn't have to be at a point of crisis that we then get to have to go through all the processes to receive support. It's about making really small and simple changes often. People we spoke to said, I wanted a fan, I wanted a headset. Those things could actually be really, really important and quite good preventive measures in terms of then preventing any kind of significant declines in someone's health by making those small changes early on. And then, because of the nature of many of the health conditions that people in later life are experiencing, which are long-term, the support that people have also needs to be sustained over time. Going back to that point around training and progression, we fundamentally need a new model of in-work training and support. Support that is available to people of all ages throughout the life course, but also some more specific interventions. So you've probably heard about the midlife MOTs, an idea which is sort of picking up some traction at the moment, and building in those points into our career specifically to enable people who are in midlife to actually stop and reflect and go, right, I'm here now and I've got X many years left in work, and this is what I want to do with them, and this is what I want to do with them in the context of my retirement. We shouldn't be scared of talking about retirement. It's a real thing in our lives, and we should be able to factor that in our conversations around what we want from the rest of our working lives and beyond. And finally, this one probably looks like the most woolly, but I think in ways is the most important. It's about creating an age-positive culture. We just need to become a bit more conscious of this. You know, we're really good on things like, or much better than we used to be, on things around gender and ethnicity and disability, for example, but we're just not very good at talking about age still in all parts of our society, and I think particularly in work. So one way in which you can become more conscious of age is by monitoring and sharing workforce data by age. You know, how old are my employees? At what parts of my business have I got older and younger employees? What's the mix like? When are people leaving our jobs? Is there a pattern? Is there a trend? And also just more generally making sure that line managers are equipped in some of these age-friendly practices, and just making sure that we're also encouraging interaction and networking amongst staff of all ages. Older employees have huge amounts to offer to a workplace. The skills and experiences that they've developed throughout their working lives. They've got some particular attributes that research has shown, for example, around resolving interpersonal conflicts and difficult situations at work, probably from having gone through a few over the years. You know, there's huge assets that they bring, and that should be utilised and shared, I think, with other members of teams. So, in summary, we are living longer and working longer. You know, our older workforce is here, it is right now, and it is continuing to grow, and that will continue to be the same for the foreseeable future. But work and the support that's available to people who are both out of work and in work needs to catch up. Our workplaces and those support mechanisms need to be better, so that working for longer is actually something that involves you kind of having a better later life. It should be about helping us to maintain our health and prepare for a good later life. Work shouldn't be just something we're trying to do until we can retire. And everyone should have an equal opportunity to access the benefits of working for longer. So I'm going to leave it there, and I think hand now back over to Scott to sort of facilitate some questions and answers.
Thanks, Gemma. That was fascinating as ever, and you're right. I've heard you speak a few times, and I'm never disappointed when you do. I have this fundamental principle that we have a real asset there in an aging workforce, and we absolutely fundamentally do not use people and their skills and their life skills and the things you mentioned about being able to resolve conflict and things because they have those life skills anywhere near enough. We have issues with passing skills and experience on to the next generation. We don't seem to have those similar issues in Europe. It just seems to be something that we find very difficult to do. One of the things I was really interested in, and it was not skipped over, but it was not 1 in 4 people unretire, or whatever you called it. Was it unretire? Was the statistic, Gemma, unretire 1 in 4 in one of your slides? Yeah. So is that for economic or social reasons? Do you know? Because do people just get bored, or do they just find that they haven't got a great deal of money anymore? And you know, what is the generic kind of reason there?
Yeah, really good question. And the answer to that is that there is no generic reason. So that research was really a really interesting piece of work, which I recommend taking a look at if you're interested in this issue. And it found that people unretire for a range of different reasons. So there are some people who unretire just because they miss work, they want to get back into it, they think, gosh, this retirement malarkey isn't all it cracked up to be. Often that tends to be people who might actually already have greater financial security, so work isn't so much a necessity for them, it's more something that they sort of would like to be doing. But we do know that, you know, a proportion of those individuals who return to work were doing so out of financial necessity. And so there are sort of people at both ends of the spectrum, I guess, those who really need to be in work and are kind of working and going back into work because they absolutely have to, and others who are staying on or going back to it because they want to. So it's definitely a mixed bag.
Okay. Any of our attendees want to ask a question? Caroline, you've normally got something to say. Hopefully we can hear you. Do you have any questions for Jemma?
Ready for you.
I'm 55. I'm not really sure I like the idea of being called an aged worker, but I do feel that currently in Luton, we are targeting all our stuff towards 18 to 24, but we don't do anything for 19 to 65. So over 50s have got no real chance of anything here. You know, are there any plans? You know, what can we do to support them? I do have a few people that I work with that are over 50 and looked at me in horror when I suggested going to university. You know, so what do we do?
I think it'd be great. So Caroline, just tell me a little bit more about your particular role.
Okay, I work for Luton Borough Council, and I work to help people referred to me get into work or higher education. So it would be people who are vulnerable people who, you know, may be at risk of homelessness or have problems within their family life. But as soon as they hit 50, they sort of curl up into a ball. And I've got one lady that is starting a new job, and she's always been very good with people of mental health. And I said to her, well, why don't you consider doing, you know, health and social care at university? And she looked at me like I was nuts. Whereas I've just proved it by passing my level 3 and also level 4 in careers advice and guidance in the last year. So it's how do we change the mindset of the people that we are working with?
It's a really, really good question. And I think one of the things that we also know is that we don't know exactly what works yet in supporting people when they decide to get back into work or into education and training. Because as you say, they've just been a neglected age group. And we've had sort of New Deal 50 plus and a few things a while back. But in terms of having some really good quality evidence around what actually works, I think the jury is still out, and that is something that at Aging Better we are going to be focusing on in the next year or two, is trying to develop and test new approaches to some of those challenges that you outline. But some of the stuff that we do know that is really important, I think there's the nature of the conversations that you have with individuals. So it's about making sure that, for one, they understand and see how much longer they've still got left in their working lives. It's amazing, but quite often people haven't really thought about it and realised that actually at 50 you've still got, you know, the 15 years or more to go in work, and that in itself can be quite an eye-opener in sort of changing people's attitudes towards what the future may hold in its prospects. I think having those conversations and about that wider set of challenges and circumstances around them is really, really key. So certainly we've encountered many people who said, I don't know about that formal kind of long training. That's a huge commitment when I've got all of these challenges around my personal health, around caring for someone else in my life. So it's about making sure that those support services are really kind of suitable in the context of their immediate and potential future challenges. I think, like you said yourself, using yourself as a positive case study and sort of allowing people to see that their peers have achieved other things does tend to be quite an important thing for this age group, because fundamentally what you're quite often seeing is that people have internalized a sense of what age means and when age becomes a barrier for them. So I think actually having those positive case studies that help to challenge some of those biases that people might have developed towards themselves. But I do think, you know, a reality is that people are finding it quite difficult to access training and, for example, feel that university isn't geared towards them, probably because the marketing materials around these degrees got lots of pictures of people who are aged 18 to 24, or the ways in which those communication materials are written. So I think there's a piece of work here about engaging with those local training providers and universities, and about making sure that they're much more positive and proactive in and encouraging in supporting older people to sort of apply for those sorts of opportunities, and equally the same with employers. So I think it is about working with the individual and doing the stuff that I'm sure you already do, but those positive case studies I think are really important. But it really is important that we engage with those wider institutions and try and shift some of their practices, because I think that's a really important route to engaging people.
I think that what we have is at the council, we still, all our apprenticeships seem to go to 18-year-olds as opposed to going to anybody who's slightly older.
Yeah.
And we have a situation where we've got youngsters with no life experience sort of handling massive issues and falling foul because the company isn't utilising the experience of the older worker to be able to take somebody aside and go, this is how you handle your work life, or you don't discuss this with a customer or anything like that. And it seems that, with Luton Council itself, they're not taking on board these kind of issues, which is really sad, because we've got so many job vacancies. But I bet, but none of my older people, I say apply for an apprenticeship and they just say, well, we wouldn't get it.
Jemma, can I just come in there and ask, kind of, I suppose, get you to comment on a kind of wider scenario then? I mentioned it earlier. How do we, with the work of your organisation, the IEP, and obviously local authorities and other employers, how do we get employers to understand the tweaks that are necessary, the small kind of movement forward that provides for equality of opportunity for everybody? Because, I'm an absolute believer, and I've said this already on this webinar, that people over the age of 50, and I know that's quite a strange kind of headline, but those individuals that have got life experience and are moving towards retirement have so much to offer to engender skills and understanding on everybody else in the workforce. How do we get business, whether that be private sector, local authorities, whether that be commercial businesses, how do we get them to understand this? Because it seems so obvious to me. How do we create equality of opportunity in that setting?
I mean, I think having the conversation is the most important thing, and I think it's really key. It's amazing actually that how often you can have a conversation with someone about this and suddenly they go, oh gosh, yeah, I haven't even really thought about it. And I think that genuinely is the case for still quite a few employers. So actually just raising this as part of the agenda, being part of the conversations that we have through our local chambers of commerce, our local economic partnerships, utilising other, yourselves as the IEP or the CBI. There's loads of other institutions, I think, as well, which we need to raise this as part of the agenda on, and just get that awareness going, I think, is the first and foremost. I think it's also really important to, two things really, recognise that we're not talking about fundamental shifts in the nature of our workplace here. Flexible working exists. It's just about making sure that people are accessing it. Health support at work exists. It's just about making sure that we're better at talking about health support at work and that people are accessing it. Career progression, there's loads of good models of support out there. We just need to make sure that we keep having those conversations with people when they hit 50 and beyond. So we're not talking about brand new things here that are a million miles away and that would cost an awful lot of money. So I think also making it clear that, this is about being more conscious and more careful and more inclusive. And the other thing is that sometimes something that you find that employers can be quite cautious of is sort of targeting or over-focusing on a particular group. And they're going, well, why would we focus on older workers? What about our younger workers? We can't do both, etc. But one of the things that we are talking about at Aging Better is about aging. This isn't about older people or over 50s. These workplace changes that we're making will benefit people of all ages in terms of better access to flexible working, better access to health support, or whatever it may be. But we are also all aging. So eventually, even if it's not us right now, your employees, if they stick with you in 20 years' time, are going to benefit from those changes. And I think making sure that we're really clear that we're talking about changing our workplaces to reflect our longer lives as we all age is something that does tend to sort of have a bit of a light bulb moment sometimes when you talk to people about this. So yeah, it's not hugely difficult, but really important, massive benefits, and also relaying to employers those many benefits of the older workforce, and making them see that it's a benefit for everyone, I think, are some of the really important things to make clear.
Okay, well, I think that's a really great place to leave that, Jemma, with that kind of almost call to action at the end of your statement there, which is, you know, absolutely fundamentally agree with you, and we need to do more and more. And I'm very grateful to those people that have deemed to attend this webinar. Thank you very much for all of you, and thank you very much for your inputs. Thank you very much to you, Jemma, for your insights and your presentation. I always really enjoy hearing from you, and I'm sure this will have impact on those that attended the webinar today, but also who can see this as we upload to our YouTube channel, and they can watch it afterwards. And yeah, thank you very much again. It was really interesting, very insightful, and I'm really pleased we've got some questions at the end that we could address those challenges. So thank you very much.
Great. And anyone that wants to follow up with me separately, Scott will circulate my details, and I'm happy to have a kind of more in-depth discussion with you.
Great. Thank you. That's great.